Every man can transform the world from one of monotony and drabness to one of excitement and adventure. Good evening, Honorable Chief Guest, Sauraj Jhingan Sir, respected dignitaries, and all the student managers. I, Swati Singhal from the river Tapti, with immense pleasure introduce you to extend a hearty welcome to our esteemed guest Sauraj Jhingan Sir for today's experience sharing session. Sauraj Jhingan Sir is the founder and director of Adventure Pulse Tours Private Limited. Today, Adventure Pulse is a pioneer in the adventure travel segment and ensures that the clients enjoy the spirit of adventure without the complications of getting there. Adventure Pulse has developed the expertise and credentials to facilitate individuals, organizations, and educational institutes to explore the outdoors and discover their true potentials. Sir completed his BCA from Symbiosis Institute of Computer Studies and Research in 2005. Sir completed his MBA from the Symbiosis Institute of Management Studies in 2007 and went on to become Regional Head Recruitments at Standard Chartered Bank. Subsequently, he was the Head HR for Dhruva Software Private Limited before founding Adventure Pulse. Adding to this, on 18th of May 2018, Sir, along with his team, successfully scaled the highest peak of the world, Mount Everest, and also covering some of the destinations like Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, Mount Blanc in France, and Mount Elbrus in Russia. Now, I would like Sir to enlighten all of us with his words of wisdom and share his success story. Sir, the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. Anyone sleeping at the back row? All right, that's good to know. Okay, so that's my colleague Sameer. We actually climbed Everest together, and we also co-founded Adventure Pulse together. So without wasting any further time, we'll actually just start with our talk because you will get to know a lot about us and our journey through the presentation. So are we good to go? Yeah. All right then.
Is this on? Yeah. We like to start our talk with asking you a question. This simple question. What's your Everest? Makes you think, right? Okay, let me explain. In 2005, we are in 2019. In 2005, exactly 14 years ago, both of us were sitting exactly where you're sitting right now. We just joined an MBA institute. We were going through an orientation. We were in SIMS, so our days used to start at 5:30 in the morning. We used to go for a run in the morning. And some boring old chap would come at 6:30 and give us a lecture. We are the boring old people now. How cool is that? Our life really started like that. In 2005, we were two young, enthusiastic student managers hoping to get a good placement in a company that paid well. Hopefully, it would have been HR, marketing, finance, लेकिन कुछ भी चलता था. This was in 2005. In 2008, we actually got into very good companies. Sauraj was working for Standard Chartered Bank in Mumbai, and I was working for a small little IT company. I don't know whether you've heard of it, Infosys. In fact, my office was just across the road at Hinjawadi, at phase 1 and phase 2. And this went on till about 2009, 2010. But the funny thing that happened in 2010 is we got tired and we got bored. We got bored of our jobs. Now, before I continue any further, all the professors in the room, I would like to take a disclaimer over here. This is not an endorsement to not do your education. Please complete your MBA. Trust me, it will actually help. In 2009, actually, Sauraj suggested, "Chal, let's go for a holiday." And so we decided we'd go for a holiday. And most people go to places like Goa, Bangkok, Bali. Correct. However, however, we decided, good, I can see everybody's awake. So we decided to go and do something a little different. We decided to do something a little different. And we decided to go to a place which most people had never gone before. We decided to go to the kingdom of Nepal. And we spent 20 days trekking in the mountains over there. And we saw this beautiful mountain called Mera Peak. And we said, Chal, let's see whether we can climb it. And after 22 days, the view we saw was this. Is the clicker working? So after 22 days, the view we saw was this. So, in fact, that's a picture of Sauraj standing in the foreground. And if you look really closely, if you look at the horizon in the distance, you can actually see that the world is not flat, it's actually curved. The horizon is actually curved. At 22,000 feet, ladies and gentlemen, this is the height at which domestic planes fly from one city to another. It's 50% less oxygen. So imagine the next time you're flying in and out of Pune, all you have to do is put your window down and stick your head out. When you come back from a holiday, you experience something of a, I don't know whether you've heard this term, hangover? Oh, you guys know it. Okay, good. You guys are very well experienced. Okay, so you experience a hangover, right? Your heart is still there in that holiday zone. You're sitting at your desk. You're wondering, God, why am I here? Why am I not there? And so we started thinking. We started thinking that, if two ordinary guys like us could actually go and climb a mountain, maybe there were other people over there who wanted to do something so different. Not the standard boring Goa holidays or the Europe holidays, but go and do something that they've seen on National Geographic and Discovery. And so we got this idea of starting up our very own adventure company. And so in 2010, we started up Adventure Pulse as a company. We started doing some really, really interesting stuff. We started exploring a lot of mountains in India. We started exploring a lot of mountains in Russia. We started exploring a lot of mountains in Africa, Kilimanjaro, the highest peak of Africa. We started exploring a lot of mountains in Leh Ladakh. Everybody wants to go to Leh Ladakh for a biking trip? So we started climbing mountains in Leh Ladakh. We started climbing mountains in Nepal, and then we started taking people to the toughest trek in the world, the Everest Base Camp trek. Yeah? But the most amazing thing about this is that we were not just doing it alone. We were taking ordinary people who wanted to just have an extraordinary experience. Most people do the Everest Base Camp trek once in their lifetime if they're crazy. Sauraj and I have collectively done it about 34 times. Now, the agenda of this was to be able to give people that fantastic experience of doing something other than what they normally do. And for us, of course, there was the next maqsad, the next lakshya. And what we started looking at was something much higher up. The summit of Mount Everest, literally the top of the world.
All right, so how many of you in this room like taking selfies? Come on, just everybody raise your hands, like just everyone. Even who's sleeping, guys, you can raise your hands for this. All right. So this is the highest selfie in the world. All right, guys, I have a request. Don't clap so much. Let's just continue with the talk because we'll run out of time as well, right? So this is the highest selfie in the world. Of course, this is not me and Sameer. Ours will come a little later. But this is a really close friend who was kind enough to share his picture with us a couple of years back. But there were many reasons which inspired us to climb Everest. And of course, this selfie was a major one, right? We want to take this picture as well. So we thought we'll climb Everest. Does that sound logical? Okay. All right. So let's come to the point, right? All of you are student managers. All of you are going to tomorrow become managers and senior managers in various corporate firms. And you're going to start working on a lot of different projects, right? When I was working with Standard Chartered Bank and when Samir was working with Infosys, we worked on a lot of projects as well. And here we were, when we started our own organization called Adventure Pulse, it was time to start and execute and successfully complete our biggest project, right? Which was what? Which was climbing the highest mountain in the world, right? And like any other project, you have multiple aspects to it, right? Every project has like maybe 5 different things or sometimes 50 different things. So what I'm going to do is in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to familiarize you guys with what took our project to be successful and what were the different aspects that we really had to explore in that, right? So I would really need you guys to now pay attention with me and be with me for the next 10 minutes. Are we good? All right. So whenever you undertake a project, the first thing you would really talk about is what are your chances of success, right? Am I doing the right thing? What are the risks that I'm taking, right? I'm sure a lot of you would have had business plans, will probably have business plans, and that's the first thing you guys do, right? Will I succeed? If I open a restaurant or a fast food chain tomorrow, will I have people who will come? So there are many aspects. For us, the risk assessment looked something like this. When we looked at the numbers, we realized that there are less than 1% people in the world till date who have actually succeeded to climb Everest, right? We also realized that there are over maybe 450 odd people who've probably lost their lives climbing Everest, right? We also realized that there are conditions like a frostbite or a sunburn or maybe both. Do you guys know what a frostbite is? Do you guys know what a sunburn is? All right. So the challenge in Everest is that you can actually get both at the same time. You can actually have your fingers frostbitten completely, and at the same time, you can have your face completely sunburned. And how that happens is that when you are, let's say, at an altitude of 7,000 meters, you're 7 vertical kilometers closer to the sun actually. The entire snow or the entire glacier would create a greenhouse effect. And the temperatures inside your tent will possibly go up to like 50, 55 degrees in the day when the sun is out. But the moment the sun goes down, then temperatures would fall down to as low as minus 40. And all this can happen in a matter of like 6 hours. Right? So, when we looked at this and we looked at those numbers, we thought, is it wise to like make so much investment and get into a project like Everest? Was it wise for us to get into a project like Everest, at least with the numbers there? It wasn't, right? But we still did. The next thing that was important for us to understand was the physical environment that we were getting into, right? So, have any of you ever traveled to a hill station? All right, show me hands. All right, great, like everybody. Okay, even the people who are sleeping raise their hands. Good stuff. Whenever you travel to a hill station or you travel to high altitude, the thing that happens the most commonly is that there is lack of oxygen, right? Whenever you go to the hills, there's less oxygen, and because of that, you have difficulty in breathing, right? So we realized that for us, right now we live in Pune. Can anybody tell me the height of Pune? The altitude of Pune?
Don't Google it.
Right. What is it?
Very good.
500 meters is pretty accurate. Good job. So it's interesting, right? We live in the city, we know where we live, we know the address, but none of us think of the altitude. What is the height that we're living in? It's just an insignificant parameter when you're at sea level. But when you're not, it's the most important parameter. So the way altitude really works is, or the way height works, is that when you go a little over 10,000 feet, you're breathing about 30% less oxygen of what you're breathing here. If you go higher up to about 18,000 feet, you're breathing 50% less oxygen. And if you go even higher up, if you go close to about 30,000 feet, which is almost close to the height of summit of Mount Everest, you're breathing just about 15 to 20% oxygen which is available to you, and you're breathing about 80% less. Right? Now, it's easy to say, but how's it that 80% less oxygen feels? Has anybody really experienced that ever? Alright, so let's do this then. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to count till 3. I want all of you, people who are sleeping are barred, you can continue to sleep. But rest everyone else, I'm going to count till 3. I want all of you to take a deep breath. And then I'm going to start counting till 10. Is everyone ready? Alright then. 3, 2, 1, breathe. Hold your breath, I'm going to start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's alright. If there are people who are continuing to breathe, that's fine. For people who are still holding their breaths, I'm counting. I'm still at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9.1. I'm still counting for the people who are holding. I can see people in the room who are holding their breath, so I'm still counting. 9.2, 9.4. All right, breathe. Everyone breathe. Plan is cancelled.
Well done.
Good job, guys. Give yourselves a big hand. All right, so the period after 8, or rather the period after 7, wasn't the most comfortable, was it? And I think the period after 9 was rather uncomfortable, wasn't it? Right? So that's what it took for us to realize the intensity of our project. The most important thing, what is the route that we have to take? Right? How does a mountaineer really climb Everest? How does he approach the summit of Everest? Right? So till now we've spoken of 2 things. We spoke of risk assessment in our project. We spoke of the environment. Right? Now we're talking of the route. Right? So essentially, all mountaineers start from a point called the base camp. And what I'm going to show you in the next 1 minute is essentially a virtual 3D simulation map of how a mountaineer really approaches to climb Mount Everest. Is everybody with me? Yes. All right. So what we do is we start our journey from a place called base camp. Sorry, I think they want the lights off. Can you go back from here? Or all right. Is that okay, guys? All right then. Okay, so we start our journey from base camp. More lights? All right. Are you guys okay up there? Can you like address what those guys want so we can start? Okay. Yeah. All right, guys, are we good to go? Yeah. All right, so please be with me. So essentially, when you start your journey, the first big feature that everybody has to cross is called the Khumbu Ice Fall. Now, the Khumbu Ice Fall has these really huge blocks of ice, each block of ice possibly being the size of this room. Imagine that big. You finish that grueling climb through the blocks of ice for about 8 to 9 hours to reach your first resting station called Camp 1. From Camp 1, you again start your journey to cross an area which is probably the size of about 20 football fields, just full of ice and snow, to reach your next resting station called Camp 2. This journey again takes a climber about 8 to 9 hours. Post that, when you start from Camp 2, you hit a wall. You actually hit a vertical wall which at certain places is almost about 60 to 70% gradient. Right? It's really steep. You're actually hanging on this wall for about good 5 to 6 hours. And once you cross that, you reach your third resting station called Camp 3. From Camp 3, You again start your journey, and now if you notice, it's just not snow or ice, right? It's a lot of rock as well. So you need to have the right skills to negotiate rock, ice, and snow to reach your final resting station called Camp 4. From Camp 4, you continue your journey on a very, very narrow ridge. So narrow that on the right is a 20,000 feet drop to Tibet, and on the left is a 10,000 feet drop to Nepal. You can actually choose which side you want to fall on. You continue on that ridge through the night for over about 10 hours, and you finally end up hitting the summit of Mount Everest, which is the highest point in the world. All right, so now if you guys want to climb Everest, you guys know how to climb it, right? So it's become easier for you guys. All right, so I have a question for everyone. So from base camp to, let's say, Camp 1 and Camp 2 and Camp 3 and further up to the summit of Everest, can anyone tell me how many days do I take? All right, I don't want prompting, guys. I want show of hands. So if anybody wants to make a guess, please raise your hands. Yes, ma'am. Sorry? 6 days. All right, she says 6 days. Any other guesses? All right, guys, no prompting. It won't work. 4 days. All right. For you? 22. All right. Yes? 18.
9
All
days.
right. I'll give you the answer, guys. So, for me to get from base camp to that point, the route map that I just showed you on an average takes me about 65 days. Right? And I'm probably guessing that you guys are wondering as to why will it take us 65 days. So I'm going to give you the answer as to why it takes 65 days, right? Do you remember the previous slide where we talked about acclimatization and we spoke about the oxygen levels? So what happens is every mountaineer needs to get used to his surroundings, which in very simple terms is called acclimatization, right? So every mountaineer needs to acclimatize to the environment around. So for me and Samir, when we reached the Everest base camp, we were at 18,000 feet. And at 18,000 feet, I'm already breathing 50% less oxygen of what is available to me here, right? So my body will not function normally. What I have to do is I have to spend anywhere from 4 to 6 days, sometimes even a week, to get used to that environment. Once I do that, and once 50% less oxygen starts feeling normal to me, I will do something called as a Camp 1 push. So I will go to Camp 1, I'll spend about 8 to 9 hours climbing through the Khumbu icefall. But when I reach Camp 1, I'm so exhausted that I spend the night at Camp 1, I dump my loads there, right? I dump, let's say, primarily food, oxygen, and tents. These are 3 things that a mountaineer would need to climb a mountain, right? I spend the night at Camp 1, but I'm so exhausted that I actually end up coming down to base camp. I again spend anywhere from 3 to 5 days resting and recuperating. And then I do a Camp 2 push. So I go all the way to Camp 2, which is at 6,500 meters now. And because my body needs to acclimatize more, I end up spending anywhere from 3 to 5 nights sleeping at Camp 2, doing smaller hikes, doing ice training, doing climbing training, right? But again, by the time I finish that, I am so exhausted that I have no option but to come down all the way to base camp. And then I do a Camp 3 push. So I repeat the circus, right? I spend 3 to 5 days at base camp, resting, acclimatizing, getting my equipment together again, and I go all the way to Camp 3 again. Camp 3 is a little over 7,000 meters. So when we spend the night at Camp 3, we're actually using supplementary oxygen. But our body is not really meant to sleep at 7,000 meters. So we come back all the way down to base camp again. So that will probably explain a little as to why a mountaineer would take anywhere from 65 to sometimes even 75 days to climb Everest. Are you guys clear on that?
You've gone through 3 different factors as far as preparing for this. You know what your target is, you know what your lakshya is, you know what it involves. Now the question is, how do you prepare for something like this? Now remember, most people think there's a shortcut to hard work. I hate to tell you this, but there's no shortcuts to hard work. If you're going to invest time into something you really, really love, you have to spend a lot of time preparing. And that's what you're going to be doing for the next 2 years. Every time you have a break and you want to get a sleep, you're going to have to sit in the library and do your research. And it makes a difference. We were so passionate about Everest, but please remember we also run our own business company. So from 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock, we are running our own business. So the only time we actually get to train is at 4 o'clock in the morning, from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And once you're done with that, we go back in the evening and we train again harder. But rather than talk about it, we've got a really cool video to show you. It's very dangle types, okay? So excuse us. Would you like to see it? Yeah? Okay, can we have the lights, please? Off.
This is how it's gonna be. This is what you think of me. It's going down like I told you. This is how it's gonna be. I'll be the last man standing here. I'm not going anywhere. It's going down like I told you. I'll be the last man standing here. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'll have you begging for mercy, begging for mercy. Oh, I'm dangerous. So dangerous. I'm dangerous. So dangerous. I'm the baddest mother up in here. And I'm about to make it clear. It's going down like I told you. I'm the baddest mother up in here. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'll have you begging for mercy, begging for mercy. Oh, come on. I'm dangerous. Yes, 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 yes. Come on. So dangerous.
Thank you so much. And obviously, the last but definitely not the least when you're evaluating any project is the budget. We like to joke about this. Everybody knows this term CTC? Yes? Everybody's heard of CTC? Okay, we define it a little differently. We don't call it cost to company. We call it cost to climb. Again, show of hands, can anybody tell me how much does it cost to climb Mount Everest? 50K. Which currency? INR, presumably. Okay, 50,000 INR. Yes. 1 to 2 crores. Which one? 10 lakhs. 10 to 20 lakhs. You're doubling your budget in the same statement. Okay, we'll give you the answer. The cost is approximately this much. 32 lakh Indian rupees. The weirdest part is when you're signing the check, after that you still have to write 32 lakhs only. Mind you, this is 32 lakhs for not just one person but two people. Okay. Also, this is not a guarantee कि ये पैसा दिया तो ऊपर पहुंचोगे. This is your investment in the project. Not only that, but there's a possibility that you may not come back alive. Are you ready? Okay, so now that you guys know how to climb Everest, your summer project is going to be climbing Everest. Sounds good? No, listen, the reason why we took you through this detailed session is not to teach you how to be mountaineers, but to try creating a parallel with what you're going to be experiencing in your projects. Okay? If you look at this carefully, you'll notice that there's a lot of planning that is involved, right? If you look at it carefully, there's a very specific budget constraint. There's a lot of communication that has to be invested in as far as the entire team is concerned. You have to get involved in the risk assessment. There's a lot of resource management that is involved. And the most important thing that you have to remember is that you have to get together a very strong team to connect all this. This is applicable universally in all projects, whether it is figuring out the next financial budget for your company or tomorrow completing the case study presentation that you have in the morning that you have to present. You have to get cracking on this. So finally, we are done with all the planning, and in 2005, we are ready to climb Mount Everest.
Yeah, so you guys are now well aware of what the project entails, right? Now it's the execution stage. So all this is done, right? We've done the risk assessment, we've got the money, we've prepared physically and mentally, and now what do? We physically execute, right? We make sure that all those years that have been spent in planning finally unfold to a good result. So in 2015, I and Samir again started making our way to the Everest Base Camp, right? And it's quite interesting. I don't know if you guys have probably read about this trek ever, or Google or YouTube it. The first stage to get to this trek is to actually land in a place called Lukla, which is one of the most dangerous airports in the world. In fact, Discovery and National Geographic say that it's just not one, but it's the most dangerous airport in the world. And do we have a video to show them? For
Yeah,
that?
I think so. Would you like, instead of telling you about it, we'll show you a video? Sounds good, right? Sir, can you switch off the lights again? So instead of saying, chal Imagika chalte, we'll chal Lukla chalte. Wait. See, you have to have some disadvantage of sitting in the balcony, right? Okay, this is a picture of Lukla Airport. It's at a 19-degree angle. If you can see, the plane actually rolls down the slope, and there's almost a second of free fall. It actually drops and then starts taking off. So we'll show you a video of this.
Plan is to fly to Lukla, at which point we'll start a 2-week trip to base camp, and from there we'll be a day or two away from the first view of the base. On the trail coming in, it winds up and down these really steep mountains, and it's their main highway. And the way they access and supply these towns is through these trails. We just got our first glimpse of the Alpine, and it's shocking. Definitely got a lot of walking to do. It is a big world. Move up this valley, it's just getting ramping up. Come around the corner, and it was just like straight in front of us, Mount Blanc, Lhotse, Mount Everest.
All right, so I hope you guys get to do this journey sometime soon. But for now, we'll continue with the execution of the project, right? So what all mountaineers do is they land at Lukla, and then they trek for anywhere from 10 to 12 days to get to this place called the Everest Base Camp, right? If you remember, we refer to this place even in the map that we showed you, right? Now, remember that it takes about 65 to 70 days to climb Everest. So the setup that you have there is not just basic camping, but a little more than that. So every mountaineer would essentially have their personal tent where they would sleep. You know, you will have a kitchen tent, you'll have a dining tent, you will have uh, tents which would have communication equipment and things like that. So, to give you an example, the tent on the left was our kitchen tent back in 2015, and the one on the right, the green one, was a dining tent. So, the kitchen tent is where um, all the butter chicken and naan and biryani is something that you don't get at all. All you just get is dal chawal all day and day out for like 2 months. Uh, so we reached base camp, and then we started our journey on top of Everest. So if you remember, the first part to cross was this place called famous Khumbu Icefall. You know, where I said that certain blocks of ice could essentially even be as big as this room. Do you guys remember that? So we'll show you a few pictures of that. So essentially, how the icefall looks is that there are just loose blocks of ice, and there's a lot of rope work and ladder work that you need to do to essentially cross the entire section. There are certain gaps in ice, which in the mountaineering terms is referred to as a crevasse, right? So you have to end up crossing those crevasses. Some could be as narrow as the picture on the left, and some could be as wide as the picture on that side, right? So you spend about 8 to 9 hours climbing this section, which is also known to be the most difficult section on Mount Everest. Unfortunately, most people who've actually lost their lives climbing Everest is in the Khumbu Icefall, because the ice is continuously moving, right? And you may be standing at one place, and the next moment you may just have a really big piece of ice which may just fall on you. So things like this and accidents like this do happen, right? What we also have is, to make it a little more interesting for you, again, a small 1 minute video which we can play for you again, and then we'll take you further in the journey. Okay.
You have to tell about the lights.
Could you switch off the lights, please?
Chitra is a good big camp all the way down there. We're right on top of the waterfall. That's good thing. The wall of my balance is a little sticky. Maybe there was a plan I started at as earlier as 122. Because they don't get traffic jam on the freeway.
I want you to put yourselves in our shoes, okay? You spent years preparing for something like this. You've set aside budget, you've trained really hard, and in 20 days' time, you've motivated yourselves that you're going to reach the top of the world. When you reach the top of the world, you have a choice. You have a phone call, and who are you going to call? Are you going to call your mom first or your girlfriend first? Mom, of course. And this is the kind of discussions we were having. But we were in for a very, very rude shock. On the 25th of April, I don't know whether you remember, but Nepal got hit by a massive earthquake. Yeah. It was so big that about 4,500 people lost their lives in seconds. Not too many people know, but that same earthquake triggered off a massive avalanche, one of the worst avalanches in the history of mountaineering. And this happened at Everest Base Camp. And it just so happened that Sauraj and I were standing right over there. Now, the 25th of April is a very special day for me because 25th of April is my wife's birthday. So, for the last 2 years, I was not around for her birthday. I was invariably in the mountains trekking. So, on the 25th of April in the morning, I woke up. Everybody reminded me, please call her. Called her up in the morning, said, hi, sweetheart, happy birthday. So sorry I'm not there, but I'm going to call you from the top of the world. She said, yeah, it's okay, don't worry about it. This happened at 8:30 in the morning. At 11:30, we were taking a break. If you notice, the video we shot was on the 22nd of April. On the 25th of April, we just come back. We were resting. We were all sitting in the dining tent. There was an Alia Bhatt movie playing. We were busy having popcorn. And suddenly, we felt the ground shaking below us. At first, we thought it was the glacier that was shifting. Has anybody ever experienced an earthquake over here? You have, right? It is, for those of you who have never experienced an earthquake, it is the most scary feeling you can ever experience. Yeah? The entire ground below you is shaking. Your head is spinning, chakkar aa jata hai. You don't know whether to stand up or to fall down. You feel physically sick, like you want to throw up. We didn't have to worry about the building falling on our head. We actually ran out of our tents because we were standing at the foot of the biggest mountain in the world. So we were busy looking at Everest, thinking, kuch hone wala hai. Maybe there's a landslide, or in the mountains you have an avalanche. But nothing was really happening. However, we could hear this sound, and it kept getting louder and louder and louder. It sounded like thunder. We guys realized we were looking in the wrong direction. We turned around, and from behind us, this huge wave, literally like a tsunami, of snow, ice, and debris was just rushing towards us. We had seconds to react. And in that moment of panic, the only thing we did was jump into the thing that gave us the most amount of safety and security. We jumped into our tents. So imagine you have 100,000 tons of snow and ice rushing towards us, and you jump into something that's made out of kapda. I still remember taking a second to pull the zip down as well. And then it hit us. And when it hit us, it felt like as if somebody had punched us in the stomach. I remember I was under a table. I didn't even know where Sauraj was. He was pulled somewhere else. And the entire table and the tent just completely collapsed on top of us. And then we could feel the snow bearing itself. You couldn't breathe. You just did an exercise of holding your breath for 10 seconds. For 45 seconds, we couldn't breathe because if you tried to breathe, there was just snow going into your nose and into your mouth. Fortunately, after a minute, it eased out. But you know, in the movies, they always say that when you're going to die, you can see your entire life flashing before your eyes. ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है. All you think is, oh God, I'm going to die. I'm not joking. After about a minute, we started digging ourselves out. It was completely dark. And then when we came out, it just looked shocking. That beautiful picture that Sauraj showed you of Everest Base Camp, there was nothing left. There were just debris of tents and materials ripped up. It looked like a scene from an air crash. I remember seeing a guy walking around in the distance completely covered in white. I didn't know who it was. I ran up to him and I just shook him saying, "Where's Sauraj? Where's Sauraj?" I didn't recognize him. And then he wiped his face, "Bhai, main hi hu." It's difficult to try describing this event in words. A friend of ours was actually in the next camp, and there was about 1 crore of camera equipment, and he had his iPhone, and he caught the entire thing on his iPhone. Would you like to see the footage? Yeah? Okay, sorry. Can I trouble you for the lights again? Okay, before we watch the video, guys and girls, a little bit of the footage, it's a little disturbing, so please bear with us, okay?
I have already told them. Send walking wounded to us. The whole horizon line explodes. We've got injured, we've got homeless, we've got tents knocked out all over the place. The middle section of base camp was obliterated. The scene was absolute devastation. I mean, they weren't tents. They were just bits of fabric laying all over the place, tent poles everywhere, bags, packs, boots, socks, everything everywhere. Most of the injured were found, and then it was a matter of finding bodies and wrapping them up. You know, given all the casualties that we brought down and the injured that we brought down, we really had no idea, because of the weather we were in, we had no idea when we were going to be able to get these people able to staff.
This is a picture of our campsite which we showed you earlier, the kitchen tent, the dining tent. And this is a picture after the avalanche, literally half an hour later. The yellow structure is what's left of our kitchen tent, and the green structure is what we got buried under. That's all that was left of our dining tent. It wasn't just a question of a couple of hours. By the end of that day, 19 people had lost their lives. There were about 60 casualties that were there. The problem was that the weather was bad and the entire country was in a bad state. So for the next 2 days, we had no help and no evacuation. We were completely cut off from the rest of the world. What do we do from here?
Guys, don't look at the avalanche. Go back to the project, right? It was about $100,000 worth of budget invested. It was years of planning, right? We had done a risk assessment that less than 1% people would succeed. So here you are that you've done so much, you've invested so much in a project. It's probably the biggest project of your lifetime. And here you are, you just hit by an avalanche, right? So what choice are you left with? Only two, right? Either you try going back up again and say that no, I am going to climb Everest because that's my dream and I've invested so much in it, or you go back home, right? So we actually did neither of the two. We thought that the best thing to do at this stage is not really to climb the mountain, but essentially to kind of stay back and help and contribute to whatever little you can do, right? So the thing is that I and Samir, of course, are not doctors, right? But when you are in minus 30 and you don't even have a fresh pair of clothes to wear, something as small as a warm jacket or just a warm cup of tea can actually make the difference between life and death. So the avalanche hit us on the 25th of April, and for 7 whole days, we and our team, till the 2nd of May, decided to stay back at the Everest Base Camp and extensively helped in the relief and the rescue efforts. Now, this happened, right? It was a closed chapter. After the 2nd of May, even the Nepal government actually announced that because of the loss that the country has suffered, Everest is officially closed as a mountain. So, every climber who aspired to climb Everest in 2015 could not. And like every other climber, even I and Samir, we walked back home.
Like all stupid but brave young men who have a dream, we like, koi nahi, chak de fate, let's go back. Let's go climb Everest again. Problem is we couldn't climb in 2016. Paisa hi nahi tha. So we spent 2 years again going through this entire circus, preparing, training, taking our topi, going to investors. Sir, please, can you invest in our project? We want to carry your flag to the top of Everest. And guess what? We actually got the money. Now we're not going to take you through the entire circus of what happened and how to prepare and base camp, camp 1, camp 2. Suffice to say, 25th of April came and went, and guess what? There was no avalanche. However, in 2017, the weather on Everest was really, really bad. In fact, I'm sure some of you have been reading news reports of 2019 that there were a lot of problems on Everest, there were a lot of people who died. In 2017, the similar situation was there. The weather was really, really bad. So we finished off our rotations, we went all the way up to Camp 3 and came back down. And finally on the 14th of May, our base camp manager said, sir, the weather's clear, you should try for it. The winds are only going to be 20 kilometers per hour on the summit. Like, take it, 20 kilometers per hour is nothing. Let's go. So 3 days later, we found ourselves 900 meters from the summit of Everest. And guess what? We got hit by a huge snowstorm. Instead of 20 kilometers per hour, we got hit by about 80 to 90 kilometers per hour winds. We were standing literally 900 meters from the top of the world. 900 meters. We were so close. We could see the target. We could see the summit. In fact, the winds were something like this. Now for the very second time again, the entire dream of climbing Everest came to a standstill. We reached Camp 4 and spent about 24 hours waiting for the weather to reduce. We kept watching, waiting, and patiently listening out for the winds to start dying down. Nothing happened. After 36 hours of spending in the death zone, we started running out of oxygen. We had not catered for spending more than 36 hours over there. So again, for the very second time, we had to turn back. I want you to look at this quote very carefully and remember this, okay? The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. At Camp 4, we could have had a choice. We could have pushed to the summit and possibly died. But the point was, it was not just one person or two people climbing. We also had an entire team. We had 3 Sherpas with us. We had another climber with us. And you had to think about the greater good. And that makes a huge difference.
Guys, let's run through the numbers again, right? What is the budget that we have now spent up to 2017? A little over $200,000, right? Because it's 2 of us climbing. We spent that much time as well, right? We could have done a lot more in that much time. So even that is a financial loss for us, right? After we've had 2 unsuccessful attempts on Everest, the important question to ask is it wise to invest the same amount of money the third time? More importantly, are you safe? And even more importantly, how do you go back and convince your family? Right? What do you go tell your friends and what do you go tell your parents that, you know what, I've spent about 1.5 CR, I almost died, but guess what, I'm going back up again. How do you think they'll react? It won't happen, right? So after the 2017 attempt, when I and Samir got back home, I'm not exaggerating, we actually had weeks of sleepless nights. And there were hours of, working in the office on the laptop, finishing work. And there were hours and days we spent not talking to each other. Only to realize one day that it's not going to happen if we keep sitting on our chairs. It'll only happen if we make it happen the third time. So we didn't speak to people. We again decided that we'll make it happen. So we again started approaching sponsors. And we told them 2015 was the avalanche, 2017 was a snowstorm. But we still need a fair chance to finish this. And there were people who believed in us. Fortunately for us, there was this company called Force Motors. It's a Pune-based automobile manufacturing company. And they agreed to sponsor or fund about 50% of our project or 50% of our expedition. But we still had the remaining 50% to go, which we somehow managed. And for the third time, we again reached Everest Base Camp in early April, right? What did we do? We did everything that the mountaineers are supposed to do. Now you guys are also experts in that process, right? So we acclimatized at Base Camp. We went up to Camp 1. We went up to Camp 2 and 3. And then again, the time came when our Base Camp manager again came to us on the 14th of May, again, coincidentally to the same day, and said, "Sir, you know what? I think the winds on the summit are going to be 20 kilometers an hour. You should try." And I and Samir looked at each other and said, "We don't have a choice. Maybe we should try." And we did, right? So we started from base camp on the 14th of May in the middle of the night at about 12 in the night. We crossed various camps, right? We crossed Camp 1, we reached Camp 2, we climbed through the Lhotse wall, and we finally reached Camp 4, which was the same place which was exactly a year back in 2017. We'd spent 36 hours almost losing our lives where we didn't have any oxygen. This time again, we planned better, right? We got more oxygen, we were better prepared, we got our weather reports and wind reports checked from different agencies, not only in India but in the US as well. And we were quite sure that it's going to be fine. We spent about 12 hours here. This place is located at 8,000 meters. It's close to about 25,500 feet. It's the highest place on earth where a human being can try and spend a night. So we did that. And the next night, we started our journey to the final summit of Everest. You remember that ridge that I told you where it has a 20,000 feet drop on the right and a 10,000 feet drop on the left? So we decided that we'll tackle that ridge through the night, not in the day, because the weather conditions were such. So at about 8 in the night, on 17th of May again, I and Samir started our journey towards the summit of Everest, and we were fortunate enough to kind of capture our journey on a video, which we would like to share with you.
Would you like to see it? Yes. It's better than listening to us talking about it, right? Yeah. Lights, please. I think he doesn't like me now.
Oh, sorry, can you switch off the lights?
That's sort of the summit of Everest. Hi guys, this is the summit of Everest. We summited at 7 p.m. Started to see the end. 1971.
On the 18th of May, we had the privilege of holding the national flag literally on top of the world. What greater reward is that? We often ask, what was it like on top of the world? And I honestly cannot tell you. The words to describe that experience are unbelievable. Was it worth it? Avalanche, earthquakes, turning back, trying, I don't know. But today when somebody asks me, are you an expert at climbing Everest? No. I think Sauraj and I both use the term, we are experts on how not to climb Everest. In fact, Thomas Alva Edison, who was asked after he successfully invented the light bulb after 2000 attempts, what was it like to fail 2000 times? He said, I didn't fail. I learned 2000 ways of how not to make the light bulb. Today we have not just the expertise and the credentials to climb big mountains, but today Adventure Pulse takes people to different parts of the world. And in 2021, we are going to be leading 3 of our own clients to the top of Mount Everest. The biggest, most important learning we have from our experience to share with you is don't be afraid to fail. Yeah? It's not about giving up or not giving up. If you're scared to even try, you've already failed. Yeah? In the next 2 years that you have in this institute, seize every opportunity. At least try. The moment you close your eyes or close your books or put your head down and say, "Mujhe sona hai," It's done. You've lost that time. Fail epically, fail miserably, fail. But from every failing, you will go back and you will think, shit, galat kya hua tha? How can I make it better? And that's what I want you guys to take away from here. In the 4 years that we continued with attempting to chase this passion and dream, there's this really famous quote that I would like to share. This gentleman is Edmund Hillary. He is the first person along with Tenzing Norgay to climb Mount Everest. Not too many people know, but in 1951 when they attempted to climb Everest, they were unsuccessful. They failed. And they had to come back. They were only able to climb in 1953, 2 years later. While coming back from Everest, he turned around and looked at the mountain. And he looked at the mountain and said, as a mountain you can't grow, but as a person I can. When you go back to your rooms today and you start thinking about the presentations you have to make and the classes you have to do and all the boring stuff, remember these are all stepping stones. You need to ask yourself one very, very simple question. What's your Everest? Thank you so very much for your time.